So, I'm going to discuss previous year's questions of geography optional and let you know that how to answer those questions, even if there's some technical term involved which you are not unable to understand. If you are having the clarity of concepts, then you can even answer those questions where where there is some technical term involved and you are failing to interpret that particular term. So I will discuss most of the previous year's questions, almost all the previous year's questions, and tell you how to answer the questions with your journal awareness and with the clarity of your concepts. How you can manage to answer those questions elegantly. Like last year, there was a question: formation of temperate cyclone depends on the conditions of axis of dilation. Here, most students fail to interpret what is axis of dilation and they tend to skip this question. Now, even if you don't know what is exactly axis of dilation, suppose this term is not clear to you, but you are clear about your conceptual clarity is there, how temperate cyclone gets formed, then you can answer this question without any difficulty. Now, you need to know where the temperate cyclone gets formed, how the temperate cyclone gets formed, and when the temperate cyclone gets formed. बस तुमको अगर conceptual clarity है कि how, what is the exact mechanism that triggers the formation of temperate cyclone, you can answer this. See, we all know that temperate cyclones get formed on polar front. What is polar front? This is polar front. Polar front is the transition zone that separates cold polar easterly winds from the warm westerly winds. These are cold polar easterly winds, polar easterlies, and these are warm westerlies. Warm westerlies. And the zone that separates them is known as polar front. Temperate cyclone always gets formed on this polar front. Where it gets formed? It gets formed on this polar front. Now, under normal conditions, when the polar easterlies and warm westerlies are blowing in parallel and opposite direction, this polar front is unperturbed. Unperturbed. Unperturbed means undisturbed. When they are blowing in parallel and opposite direction, this polar front is unperturbed or undisturbed. There is no weather phenomena. Cyclogenesis or formation of cyclone will take place on this polar front. It always takes place on this polar front whenever the polar easterlies converge equatorward and warm westerlies turn poleward. Whenever this convergence takes place, there the formation of temperate cyclone takes place. Where? Wherever the unperturbed front is distorted by a wave shaped discontinuity. Whenever the polar easterlies and warm westerlies start converging, wherever on they will converge on this polar front. Wherever this polar front is distorted by this wave shaped discontinuity, at that particular place, cyclogenesis takes place. Clear? Cyclogenesis, that is formation of temperate cyclone, takes place on polar front wherever this convergence sets in. When will this convergence takes place? Whenever a low pressure is created on this polar front. Whenever a low pressure is created, this low pressure causes the polar easterly to turn equatorward and warm westerlies to turn poleward. Whenever low pressure center is created, this convergence takes place. So when this low pressure is created, see, this low pressure is created by numerous factors and this convergence may take place. But as a rule of thumb, whenever this low pressure is created by this uh, polar front jet streams which are blowing in upper atmosphere, whenever this low pressure is created by polar front jet stream, then this cyclogenesis translates into full-fledged temperate cyclone. So when and how? When will this low pressure get created? See, polar front jet streams are very high speed winds blowing in upper atmosphere. Above this polar front, above this zone, the polar front jet streams are blowing in a meandering way. They form meanders, high speed winds blowing in upper atmosphere. They move towards pole, then turn towards equator like this. They are meandering like this. These meanders are known as Rossby waves. Polar front jet streams are moving like this, northward, southward in the upper troposphere above this. This is upper air trough and this is upper air ridge. Ahead of upper air trough, here divergence takes place. Behind the upper air trough, here convergence takes place. And they are blowing like this. Whenever this region where the divergence is taking place, this region lies over the polar front. See, where the this is area ahead of upper air trough, where the wind is diverging. Whenever the wind diverges, it sucks the air from below. This is happening in upper troposphere. Winds are meandering in upper troposphere ahead of upper air trough. Here the divergence is taking place. This divergence always sucks the air from below. When the air is diverging, it sucks the air from below and air rises up to be incorporated in jet stream. When wherever the air is rising, low pressure is created on the surface. Low pressure. Whenever this region ahead of upper air trough in the upper atmosphere, whenever this lies over the polar front, the divergence that is taking place, it sucks the air from below, and as the air rises and gets incorporated into jet stream, low pressure is created on the surface. When this low pressure is created, the convergence, polar polar easterlies turn towards equator and warm westerlies turn towards pole, and this convergence sets in. That is, in technical terms, this convergence is known as unstable wave or wave shape discontinuity. It gets formed. Now, when this region continues to suck the air, the low pressure goes on intensifying. As a result, the wind velocity, when this low pressure will get lowered, the pressure gradient will become steep, and the wind velocity of polar easterlies and warm westerly will go on increasing, and wind from far off regions will also start converging, and this forms cold front and this forms warm front. Now, when this low pressure goes on intensifying, wind velocity starts increasing. And as the wind velocity increases, the outward acting Coriolis force also starts increasing. And the intensity of wind, the size of cyclone, the curvature, amplitude, size, and intensity of temperate cyclone goes on increasing. And it transforms into mature stage, full-fledged cyclone. So, this is the condition. What is the condition? How temperate cyclone gets formed? How? Basically, it gets formed by way of this process. Whenever this region ahead of upper air trough, these are Rossby waves. These meanders are what? These are Rossby waves. Whenever this region ahead of upper air trough lies above the polar front, it sucks the air from below because of this divergence, and low pressure gets formed, and it not only gets formed, it continues to get intensified because of this divergence. And when it continues to get intensified, wind starts converging with greater velocity in far off regions, and the size and amplitude of cyclone undergoes marked increase. So, what is axis of dilation? Axis of dilation is simply this polar front. This polar front where greatest temperature gradient is found, because it separates cold polar easterlies and warm westerlies. It is this polar front which is acting as axis of dilation, which acts as axis of dilation. What are the conditions of axis of dilation? Basically, the condition is whenever this region ahead of upper air trough lies above this polar front, it leads to the genesis of cyclone, that is cyclogenesis, and temperate cyclone gets formed. This you must know whenever this will lie over the polar front. How? By way of this process. Where? On this axis of dilation. Polar front itself is axis of dilation. सो ये एक्सिस ऑफ डायलेशन क्या है? यही पोलर फ्रंट कंडीशंस ऑन एक्सिस ऑफ डायलेशन. These are the conditions whenever this area ahead of upper air trough lies over this polar front, formation of temperate cyclone takes place. Simple question tha. There was nothing much involved. But if you have the clarity of concept, you can answer it easily. अगर तुमको ये मालूम है टेम्परेट साइक्लोन कैसे बनता है, it hardly matters you will whether you know what is axis of dilation or not. Axis of dilation is simply this polar front, and the condition on this polar front, formation of temperate cyclone depend on the conditions of polar front. Axis of dilation is polar front where steepest temperature gradient is found. Fine. So I'll continue to discuss the previous year's question so that you may know. कई बार ऐसे क्वेश्चंस भी आते हैं जिनमें केवल कॉमन सेंस रिक्वायर्ड होता है. यू हैव द इंफॉर्मेशन बट यू फेल टू कन्विंस योरसेल्फ कि या यही लिखना है क्या. Doubts are creeping hota hai. Doubts creep in. There's apprehension in your mind whether I'm going right or wrong. Arey beta, have faith in yourself. If your clarity of concept is there, formation yahi hoti hai on polar front. That means this is axis of dilation. ऐसे कई क्वेश्चन और भी हैं जो I will discuss in previous year's questions. Now a series will be there where I will tell you merely by using your common sense you can write very good answer. विदाउट बहुत ज़्यादा इंफॉर्मेशन लोड होने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. देयर इज नो नीड टू हैव मच रिसोर्सेज. यू नीड टू हैव रिसोर्सफुलनेस. जो भी रिसोर्सेज तुम्हारे पास हैं उसका बेस्ट पॉसिबल यूज कैसे करना है, दैट इज व्हाट इज रिक्वायर्ड. ओके, ऑल द बेस्ट.